I remember the night she brought it up. It was a Tuesday, one of those dead middle-of-the-week nights where everything feels like a pause between two more important moments. We were sitting on the couch, half watching a cooking show, the kind where everyone cries over slightly overcooked risotto. I had a beer in one hand and my feet up on the ottoman. She was scrolling her phone with that subtle smirk she gets when she's building up to something. "Can I ask you something?" she said, not looking up. That's never a great way to start a sentence when you've been married 7 years. I muted the TV. "Yeah. What's up?" She locked her phone and placed it on the coffee table like she was surrendering a weapon. "I've been thinking, maybe we should try opening things up." Just like that. I sat there, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. I blinked. "Opening things up?" She nodded. "Yeah. Like, non-monogamous. Just, see other people. You and me, still together, but, open." She said it like she was suggesting we switch to almond milk. I won't pretend I handled it well. I laughed. Then I stopped. Then I asked if she was joking. She wasn't. "I love you," she said, "but I think we've grown comfortable. And comfort isn't the same as passion." I sat with that. Let it soak through my skin like acid. "We don't fight," I said. "Exactly," she said. "We don't fight. We don't feel anything big anymore." She looked at me like she was trying to offer a gift. Like this was some brave act of honesty. But all I heard was, "I'm bored of you and I want to try someone else without feeling guilty." I asked her if there was someone else. She hesitated. That told me everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay next to her, both of us staring at our separate ceilings. Her side. My side. Like borders drawn in sheets. I didn't touch her. She didn't try. And somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., I made a decision. I was going to say yes. Not because I wanted to. But because I wanted to see who she really was when the mask slipped. The next morning, over cold coffee and cereal, I told her, "Okay. Let's do it." She looked surprised. But then she smiled. The kind of smile people wear when they've already bought the plane tickets and just need the weather to cooperate. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "You're amazing," she said. "I knew you'd understand." I didn't. But I didn't tell her that. By the end of the week, she had her first date. His name was Jeremy. She claimed they'd only been texting a couple of days. I knew better. I knew because I'd seen his name pop up on her phone 3 weeks earlier when she left it unlocked on the kitchen counter. I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't want to believe what I already knew. Now, I leaned into it. "Have fun," I said when she left for dinner that Friday night. She kissed my cheek, the same way someone kisses their cat before leaving for work. I poured myself a drink. Sat on the couch. And stared at the door for 2 hours. When she came back, her perfume was stronger. Her smile was easier. She was humming. She didn't say much about the night. Just that it was nice. I didn't ask questions. Didn't pry. And for a while, I thought that was the end of it. But that was just the start. Because the more she drifted, the more I saw what our marriage had become. It wasn't a fire anymore. It was a couch we both fell asleep on during reruns. I had loved her. I still did, maybe. But I had no place in her future anymore. And the more I accepted that, the more I began to imagine my own. The first time I went on a date, I didn't tell her. I didn't feel like I owed her that courtesy anymore. Her name was May. I met her through a book club I'd joined, mostly to get out of the house. She laughed at my sarcasm, didn't take herself too seriously, and made eye contact like she meant it. We got coffee. Then lunch. Then I kissed her in the parking lot and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. That was the first moment I realized. Maybe I wasn't the one who'd settled. There's something sobering about realizing your marriage is no longer a partnership, it's a negotiation. After I started seeing May, things didn't explode right away. There were no arguments. No screaming. In fact, my wife barely acknowledged the shift. She seemed almost relieved, like she'd expected me to fall apart and was quietly disappointed when I didn't. A week after my third date with May, my wife dropped the word boundaries over breakfast. Maybe we should talk about what this is, she said, casually stirring her oatmeal. This? I asked. Us. Our new setup. Her tone was polite. Businesslike. Like we were co-workers dividing up parking spaces. All right, I said. What did you have in mind? She paused, then offered a rehearsed list. No overnight stays. No bringing anyone here. And full honesty if it gets serious. I sipped my coffee. You sleeping with Jeremy? She looked up, caught off guard. That's not what I meant. It's what I meant, I said. Honesty, remember? A long pause. Then, yes. She looked down at her spoon, and for a second, I thought I saw something in her face, guilt, maybe. Or something worse, indifference. I nodded slowly. Okay. Then I'll be honest too. She waited. I've been seeing someone. Her name's May. I didn't say, dating. I said, seeing. Something about the word felt more deliberate. More, anchored. Her jaw clenched, just for a second. Anne, how serious is it? I don't know yet, I said. But it's real. That was the moment she stopped seeing me as the man she could keep in a box. From that day on, something shifted in the air between us. Not quite tension, more like a cold war of half smiles and polite distance. She was used to being the one with control. But now I was doing more than surviving. I was moving on. May didn't know the full story right away. We kept things light at first, bookstores, coffee shops, long walks through the park on Sunday mornings. She asked thoughtful questions. She actually listened to the answers. One night, sitting in her car, she finally said, "You don't talk about her much. Your wife." I stared out the windshield at the empty lot in front of us. "There's not much worth talking about anymore," I said. She wanted something different. And now I do too. May nodded. Didn't press. She had that rare gift, knowing when silence is more meaningful than conversation. When she touched my hand, it wasn't a move. It wasn't a power play. It was just comfort. Steady. Solid. I hadn't felt that in years. Back home, things got quieter. My wife still saw Jeremy. Still went out on Thursday nights, sometimes Saturdays. She started texting more often with a slight smile on her lips. But she also started watching me, subtle glances when she didn't think I noticed. She saw me smiling at my phone. She heard me laugh in the hallway when May sent me a voice message about some ridiculous poem she found online. And one night, she asked, "Are you seeing her again tomorrow?" I looked up from my book. Yeah. She nodded, then went back to folding laundry. And for the first time in months, I realized she wasn't as okay with all of this as she wanted me to believe. 3 weeks later, she canceled a weekend trip with Jeremy. "I just needed some space," she said. "Sure," I said, not looking up from the sink. She leaned against the counter. "You seem different." "I am." She waited. "You seem happier," she said finally. "With her." I shrugged. "She's easy to talk to." Silence. "You never talk to me like that anymore." I dried my hands and looked at her. Really looked. We stopped talking a long time ago, I said. Now we just exchange updates. She didn't reply. Just stood there in that weird, unsettled quiet. And for the first time, she looked lost. That night, I lay in bed and thought about how quickly things change when someone realizes they're no longer the center of the room. She'd opened the door thinking she'd walk through and leave me standing still. But now she was the one watching the house get built from the outside. People don't talk enough about what it feels like to come back to life slowly. It doesn't happen like the movies. There's no musical swell, no triumphant fist raised to the sky. It's quieter than that. It's subtle. Like waking up from a long nap you didn't realize you were taking, and suddenly noticing that everything smells sharper, sounds clearer, and feels like it matters again. That was how it started with May. Piece by piece, moment by moment. One Saturday morning, we went to a farmer's market. It was one of those early spring days where everything smells like thawing soil and fried dough, and everyone's out pretending winter didn't almost break them. May walked beside me, holding a paper cup of lemonade, a sun hat slouched casually over her brow. She was telling me about a dream she had, something about owls running a diner in space, and I realized I hadn't thought about my wife in over an hour. Not once. And that realization didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel free. Later that afternoon, we sat on a park bench with a bag of warm kettle corn between us. I told her about the time I tried to fix the washing machine and accidentally flooded our entire laundry room, and she laughed, really laughed, this open, melodic sound that turned heads. "Your poor wife," she said teasingly, nudging me with her elbow. I hesitated. Then I said it. She wanted an open relationship. May turned toward me. "And you agreed?" I nodded. She didn't ask the obvious question. Instead, she said, "How's that going?" I said, "It finally taught me what I really want." She smiled, soft and sad and curious. "And what's that?" "To be with someone who doesn't see me as a placeholder." Her eyes didn't waver. "Good," she said. "Because I don't do placeholders." Back home, things were changing. Subtle at first. But definite. My wife started staying in more often. Movie nights, just because. Cooking together again, her spaghetti recipe, my garlic bread. She complimented my shirt one night. Asked if I wanted to go see a movie. Even suggested a weekend trip we talked about years ago but never took. And I could tell, it wasn't guilt. It wasn't peace. It was fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear that she already had. She didn't ask about May again for a while. Not directly. But one night, while we were eating takeout, she said, "Do you think you're getting too close to May?" She nodded, chewing slowly. "Probably," I said. She didn't respond. Just looked out the window at nothing. A few days later, I brought May to an outdoor reading. Local poets, acoustic guitars, that kind of thing. Nothing dramatic. But when I introduced her to a few friends of mine, she made them laugh in under 5 minutes. One of them pulled me aside and said, "You've got a glow, man." What's her story? I didn't know how to answer. Because her story wasn't something I was watching from the outside anymore. It was something I was in. That night, May and I sat on the hood of her car, staring up at the stars, our breath fogging in the air. She was quiet for a long time. "You good?" I asked. She nodded. "Just, happy. And scared to mess that up." "You're not," I said. "I know. But I'm used to things falling apart." "So am I," I said. "But maybe this time, we build it different." She looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. I was gonna wait a few more weeks, but, here. Inside was a hand-drawn map. Little inked dots for coffee shops, bookstores, trails. Places we'd been. In the corner, a tiny house. Scribbled words beneath it, for someday. I held the map like it was fragile. Because it was. And I realized I wasn't just moving on anymore. I was building. At home, my wife noticed. She noticed everything. My lighter steps. The way I hummed in the kitchen. How I stopped checking my phone around her because the one person I wanted to hear from was already with me as much as I needed her to be. "You've changed," she said one night. "I had to," I replied. She didn't say anything else. But her silence was loud. Because she'd opened the door thinking I'd wander. She never expected I'd walk through it into something better. The first real crack showed up on a Wednesday. I came home late, nothing dramatic, just dinner with May and a quiet stroll afterward. When I stepped into the house, I found my wife sitting on the edge of the couch, TV off, lights dimmed, holding an empty mug like it was something that might break if she let it go. "You didn't text," she said without looking up. "I didn't think I had to," I replied, shrugging off my coat. "A beat. You always used to," she said, and her voice didn't carry anger, just a kind of hollow nostalgia. The kind people get when they find a photo from a vacation they barely remember being happy on. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care. But because I finally understood I didn't owe her that piece of myself anymore. She started asking questions after that. Not invasive, not all at once. But enough to notice. "Did May read that book I recommended? Is she into photography like you are? Do you two talk about serious stuff?" I answered when I felt like it. Left the rest hanging. And slowly, I saw it happen. The jealousy. The regret. Like a slow leak in the ceiling, small at first, then spreading into something impossible to ignore. A few days later, she brought up Jeremy. "I haven't seen him in a couple weeks," she said, stirring her tea. I waited. She looked up. He got a little distant. Said he wasn't sure this was for him. I nodded. "That happens." She waited again, like she wanted me to say more. Maybe something comforting. Maybe anything. But I didn't. And I think that's when she realized. This wasn't a game anymore. I wasn't just letting her play house with someone new while I held the door open. I'd stepped through that door. And closed it behind me. A week later, I caught her scrolling May's Instagram. She didn't see me watching. She paused on a photo of us from the market, me holding a bag of apples, May mid-laugh. One of those candid shots that says everything's okay now without a single word. And my wife just stared at it. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she locked her phone and shoved it under a pillow. We had a shared calendar on the fridge, a relic from the days when we were syncing weekend getaways and family holidays. Now, it was mostly blank. Until one morning, I noticed something new. In her handwriting, scribbled next to Saturday. "Dinner? Us?" No explanation. No emojis. Just those two words. I left it there all day, pretending not to notice. Pretending like I had better things to do than read messages written in dry erase hope. Then, after dinner with May, I came home and crossed it out. Not out of cruelty. But because I knew if I went, it wouldn't be dinner. It'd be a test. A rewind button she hoped would work. And I wasn't going backward. That night, she waited for me in the kitchen. She didn't say anything when I came in. Just leaned against the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You're really not going to try?" she asked finally. "I did try," I said. "For years. And so did you. But then you asked me to open the door. You didn't have to walk through it." I set my keys on the counter. "No. I didn't. But I'm glad I did." And the look on her face. It wasn't heartbreak. It was realization. That I was done fighting for something she'd already sold off in pieces. The next morning, I found a box in the living room. Inside were a few old photos. A watch I thought I'd lost. My first Father's Day card from her niece. A copy of the vows I wrote, printed on cardstock. She'd packed them. Like someone quietly closing a door in a museum room no one visits anymore. There was a note on top. "You're right. You've moved on. I need to figure out how to do the same. I hope she's as good as you seem to think she is. P.S. She seems like she is. I don't hate her. I think I might hate that I waited until you were happy to realize I wasn't." I folded the note. Slid it back into the box. Didn't say anything. Because sometimes, silence is the kindest reply. That weekend, May and I went hiking. At the peak, she handed me a thermos of coffee and pointed to the horizon. "Look at that view," she said. "Kind of makes everything else feel small, doesn't it?" I looked at her. At the freckles the sun brought out. The wind pulling at her scarf. The way she existed completely, without apology. And I said, "Yeah. But it makes the things that matter feel bigger, too." She smiled. And we stood there, above the noise, above the past. Building something better. The first time May helped me clean out the garage, it didn't feel like a big moment. But later, when I sat alone, staring at the now empty shelves and reorganized bins, I realized it was one of those quiet turning points, the kind you don't see until they've already happened. We were cleaning together, sweating and laughing and tossing out everything I'd been too sentimental, or too stuck, to deal with. Broken lawn chairs. Old photo frames with glass missing. A half-functioning treadmill that I'd told myself for years I was just about to fix. She held up a dusty box labeled wedding stuff and raised an eyebrow. "You want me to leave this for you?" I hesitated. Then I said, "No. Let's open it." Inside were the ghosts. A guest book with half-hearted messages from people I didn't talk to anymore. A photo album, stuck shut from moisture, filled with smiles that didn't know what was coming. Dried flowers, crumbling like leaves in a storm. May didn't gawk. Didn't ask questions. She just sat beside me as I thumbed through it, page by page, letting each one pass without comment. When we reached the bottom of the box, I pulled out a single folded napkin with our names printed on it. I held it for a second. Then passed it to her. She held it gently. "I never knew what it was supposed to feel like," I said. "Marriage, I mean. I thought maybe it was just, this thing you try to keep from falling apart." May looked at the napkin. "Or maybe it's supposed to be the thing you build, not just protect." We tossed the napkin. The box went out with the rest of the garbage. Later that evening, May made dinner, spaghetti and garlic bread, completely unaware that it used to be our thing. My ex and I. Except this time, the house felt different. Lighter. We ate at the table, not in front of the TV. We talked between bites. Laughed. Argued about which album by The National was their best. It wasn't fireworks. It was a slow burn. But it warmed in all the right places. Afterward, I washed dishes while she dried, and she paused, leaned against the counter, and said, "You okay?" I nodded. "More than okay." She smiled. "I like your house," she said. I looked around. It's finally starting to feel like mine again. That week, I got a message from my ex. Just a simple text. "Do you have time to talk?" I stared at it for a long time. Long enough for my coffee to go cold. May was reading in the other room. I walked in, sat beside her. "My ex wants to talk." May looked at me. Calm. "Do you want to?" "I think I need to." She nodded. "Then do it." We met at a coffee shop on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. She looked tired. Not unwell, just worn. Like someone who'd been on a long walk in shoes that didn't fit. We did small talk. Polite. Careful. Then she said it. I thought it'd make me feel free, she said. The open thing. I thought I was reclaiming something. And I think I was just afraid of standing still. I stirred my coffee. I get that. She looked up. I was waiting for you to fall apart. I raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. I was stupid. I told myself you'd just orbit around me forever, and when you didn't. I panicked. She reached into her coat and slid a small envelope across the table. I found this. It's yours. Inside was a letter I'd written her years ago. On our first anniversary. One of those, in case you ever forget why we started, kind of letters. I didn't open it. Why now? I asked. Because I think it's time to give it back, she said. You deserve to write a new one. For someone else. I stared at the envelope, heart heavy and light all at once. You okay? I asked. She gave a small smile. Getting there. When I got home, May was still reading, curled up on the couch in one of my hoodies. I slid the envelope into the junk drawer. I'm not opening it, I said. She looked up. Okay. I'm done looking backward. She folded the page she was reading and set it down. You sure? I'm sure. She smiled. The real kind. The kind that says I see you. That night, we started a puzzle at the kitchen table. No phones. No music. Just the sound of rain tapping the windows and the quiet rhythm of something simple shared. Piece by piece, we built something. Edges first. Then corners. The rest, we figured out together. You know how people say, it's the little things. They're not wrong. But what they don't say is how hard it is to trust those little things again after they've failed you before. Trust is like a floor you thought was solid, until you stepped on it one day and went crashing through. Even after you rebuild it, part of you walks a little lighter. Part of you waits for it to give way again. That's what May and I were working through now, not drama, not lies. Just patience. Healing. Figuring out how to walk on a floor that used to creak under my weight. It rained for 6 days straight. Not the romantic kind. Not the soft, gray drizzle that makes you want to curl up with a book. This was cold and heavy, sheets of water slamming against the windows, thunder low and long, like the sky was clearing its throat and not quite ready to speak yet. On day 3, the power went out. We lit candles, played cards, made dinner on the grill outside under the awning. May wore fingerless gloves and kept her sleeves pulled over her palms, humming tunelessly while I made soup on a camping burner. I watched her carefully. The way she made everything feel less like a storm and more like a pause. I could get used to this, I said, pouring us both a mug of broth. She smirked. The blackout or me stealing all your sweaters? Both. She looked at me then, really looked, and there was something steady in her eyes. Something that said, I'm not waiting for the light to come back. I'm already home. On the 5th day, the basement flooded. I panicked. Grabbed buckets. Towels. The shop vac. I hadn't been down there much since the divorce, too many boxes, too many echoes. But now I had no choice. May followed me down, not even flinching when she stepped into 2 inches of water. Tell me where to start, she said. I told her which boxes to move to higher ground. She went to work, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, humming again, same rhythm as the rain. That night, soaked and shivering and exhausted, I sat on the floor in the living room, head resting on her knee. You didn't have to help, I said. She ran her fingers through my hair. That's what partners do. And just like that, I realized. I'd never really had one before. Not like this. On day 6, the rain stopped. We opened all the windows. The air smelled like earth and new beginnings. I stood on the porch, sipping coffee, watching puddles slowly shrink in the driveway. May joined me, wrapping a blanket around both of us. "You ever think about where this is going?" she asked. "All the time. And I think I'm not afraid to find out anymore." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Me neither." A few days later, we had dinner with my friends. The same group that had seen me at my worst, during the unraveling, the post-divorce weight loss, the hollow-eyed coffee nights. They greeted May like she'd been there all along. Halfway through dinner, one of them pulled me aside. "She's good for you," he said. "You're softer." "In a good way." "I didn't know I needed soft," I said. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Nobody does. Until they feel it." That night, May and I walked home under clear skies. She stopped halfway down the block and turned to me. "If we ever built something, like a place, a home, what would it look like?" I thought for a moment. "Bookshelves. Lots of light. A big porch for mornings like this. And a room for the past," I said. "One we keep shut. Just to remember why we built all the others." She took my hand. "Let's start sketching." Back at the house, she pulled out a fresh journal. Opened to the first page. Passed me the pen. "Let's draft something." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was building something to fix what was broken. I was building something because I wanted to. Because I believed in it. Because I wasn't alone anymore. It was a Sunday morning when I saw her again. Not May. Her. My ex-wife. I was coming back from the corner cafe with 2 coffees and a paper bag full of fresh scones, sun on my shoulders, May humming to herself through the open window upstairs. The kind of morning that makes you forget there was ever anything before it. Then I saw her. At the end of the street, standing by the fence of a for sale sign planted crooked in the lawn. She didn't see me at first. She was staring at the house. The one she and I used to talk about in that half-fantasy way people talk about winning the lottery. If we ever had the money, imagine a porch like that, that's what we'll want when we're old. I didn't move. Just watched her from half a block away. She looked thinner. Maybe tired. Not broken. Just quiet in a way I hadn't seen her be before. Then she turned, and our eyes met. She walked toward me slowly, as if unsure if she was welcome in the frame anymore. When she reached me, she glanced at the bag in my hand. "Still a sucker for cinnamon scones," she said. "Some habits are worth keeping," I said, offering a faint smile. She looked down the street, toward my house. "You seem good." "I am. I'm glad." The words were right, but they came wrapped in something else. Maybe envy. Maybe loss. "Are you buying it?" I asked, nodding at the house. She shook her head. "Just looking." I sipped my coffee. Some houses look better from the outside. That one landed. I saw it in her shoulders. "I was selfish," she said after a moment. "I thought opening the relationship would fix something. But I think I was just trying to get a running start before I jumped. And now?" I landed hard. I nodded. "Let the quiet stretch." "You found something better," she said, softly. Not a question. A truth she'd already accepted. "She's kind," I replied. "And strong. And honest. And she doesn't run when things get heavy." My ex wrapped her arms around herself. "I didn't know how to be that kind of person. I'm still not sure I do." "That's your work now," I said. "Not mine." Another pause. Then, without looking at me, she said, "Do you ever miss it?" I didn't lie. Sometimes, I said. The good parts. But I've stopped pretending the good parts were the whole story. She nodded like she already knew that. Then she took a step back, smiled gently, and said, "Be happy, okay? I already am." And just like that, she turned and walked back the way she came, past the old house, past the overgrown sidewalk where we used to dream, and into the rear view of my life. Back inside, May was sitting cross-legged on the couch, journal open in her lap. "Hey," she said, looking up. "You okay?" I handed her the scones and sat beside her. I saw her. May didn't flinch. Just nodded. "How'd it go?" "Better than it might have. Worse than I expected. But it's done." She waited. Let me finish my thought. "I don't need answers from her anymore," I said. "And I don't owe her any more of mine." May reached out and traced her finger along the edge of my coffee mug. "You're allowed to miss who you were. Even if you don't want to go back." "I don't," I said. "Not even close." That night, we walked down the block together, past the old house, past the crooked sign, past the ghosts of old plans. May squeezed my hand. "You ever wonder what it would have been like if you'd stayed in that life?" she asked. I looked up at the house. Porch sagging. Paint chipped. Dream deferred. "I don't wonder," I said. "I know. And I'd still be waiting for something to change." She nodded. And then we walked on. Moving on isn't about burning the old house down. It's about choosing not to live there anymore. You let it stand. Let the walls grow soft with age, let the memories echo if they must, but you stop reaching for the doorknob. That's where I was now. That's where we were. May and I found a place. Not big. Not flashy. A fixer-upper with good bones and ugly wallpaper. The kind of house you don't fall in love with at first sight, but somewhere between coat number 2 on the walls and the third trip to the hardware store, you realize you've started belonging to it. We signed the papers on a Thursday morning. Drank flat champagne on the front steps that night, laughing as May tripped over a half-buried garden gnome that we both swore was watching us. "This is ours now," she said, brushing dirt from her jeans. I nodded. "First time I've had a week that felt like home." She leaned into me. "Let's build it like we mean it." The first key I slid onto my ring was the front door. The second was for the shed out back. The third, May handed me one afternoon without ceremony, was to a small wooden lockbox she'd tucked into the bottom drawer of her nightstand. "What's this?" I asked. "Letters," she said. "Stuff I wrote when I didn't know how to say what I felt. For you. For me. For the version of us I hoped we'd become." I didn't open the box right away. Some rooms are sacred. Some moments earn their delay. But I kept the key close. Not for snooping. For safekeeping. We made traditions fast. Sunday pancakes, even when they came out half-burnt. Thursday night walks, where we'd pick one neighbor's house and invent an entire backstory for who lived there. One of the houses we passed reminded me of the place I used to live with my ex-white siding. Sloping roof. A wind chime that didn't know when to stop. I stopped walking for a second. May noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just, déjà vu. You want to talk about it?" "No," I said. "Not anymore." She didn't press. Just took my hand and kept walking. The past still visited, from time to time. In dreams. In smells. In songs you can't skip fast enough. But it stopped holding the power it once did. I wasn't carrying it anymore. I'd put it down. Boxed it up. Given it a room with no key. And that made all the difference. We held a housewarming party in early fall. Just a few friends. String lights in the backyard. Folding chairs and mismatched mugs. May read aloud one of her poems, soft, funny, achingly honest. It ended with the line. We planted a garden where the wreckage used to be. And somehow, the things we grew knew better than to wilt. Everyone clapped. I stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, and smiled. I wasn't thinking about who wasn't there. I wasn't wondering who might be watching. I was just, there. Fully. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the candles had burned low, I found May in the living room, barefoot on the rug, dancing alone to some record spinning slow. "Come dance," she said, holding out her hand. "I don't dance," I reminded her. "You do now." And so I did. We danced. Clumsy. Offbeat. Grinning like idiots. Because the past had its rhythm, but this? This was a new song. One we were writing together, measure by measure. We didn't plan the garden. It started with one busted shovel and a half-dead basil plant May picked up on a whim at a flea market. We stuck it in the ground next to the back steps, fully expecting it to wither like everything else we'd neglected during that first chaotic month of moving in. But it didn't. It thrived. And so we kept planting. Cherry tomatoes. Rosemary. A lemon tree in a pot we knew wouldn't survive the winter, but planted anyway because hope should be allowed a little foolishness. It became a ritual, Saturday mornings in the dirt, pulling weeds and chasing worms, May humming under her breath while I wrestled with the sprinkler system and tried not to flood the yard. One day, I caught her just standing there. Looking at it. All of it. The mismatched rows. The crooked stone path we laid by hand. The wooden bench we salvaged from a neighbor's trash and sanded down into something beautiful. "It doesn't match," she said, eyes scanning the chaos. "It's ours," I replied. She smiled, and I knew she understood. We weren't planting a garden. We were reclaiming ground. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. No stamp. Just my name on the envelope in handwriting I hadn't seen in months. It was from her. My ex. Inside was a short note. "I'm selling the house. Thought you should know. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. K." I folded the letter slowly. Then tossed it in the recycling bin. There was nothing in that house I wanted anymore. Not the walls. Not the floors. Not the memories trying to wear a new face. May watched me do it, but didn't ask. She didn't need to. Fall arrived with orange skies and slow mornings. We hosted Sunday brunch for a few friends. May made muffins. I made French toast. Someone brought cider and spiked it when no one was looking. At one point, May pulled me aside, a sly grin on her face. "I've been thinking," she said. "Maybe we should tear down that old shed. You finally done pretending it's useful?" She laughed. "We could build something back there. A studio. A reading nook. A place for more than just junk." I looked out the window at the leaning, moss-covered shack. "You sure?" She nodded. "We built this. We can build anything." Later that week, we started drafting sketches. May's were detailed, lined, color-coded. Mine were scribbles, half ideas and hopeful guesses. She taped them to the fridge. "Blueprints for better things," she said. I looked at the fridge door, covered in magnets, lists, postcards, and now, dreams. It looked like a life in progress. It looked like home. That night, I sat on the back porch while May watered the garden by moonlight. The basil plant, our first, had grown tall and wild. Unruly. Beautiful in a way that couldn't be forced. I thought about how much had changed. How much we'd planted. And how much was finally growing. May walked over and sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Roots," I said. Mine or yours? Ours. She reached over, fingers lacing through mine. Then we're in good soil. The final hammer swing came on a Sunday. May and I stood back and looked at the spot where the old shed used to be, just a patch of sun-drenched dirt now, framed by the garden on one side and a fence that still leaned a little too far to the left. We were sweating, sore, covered in flecks of paint and wood dust. The air smelled like crushed rosemary and sawdust. You know, May said, hands on her hips, I don't miss it. The shed? No, she said, turning to me. My old life. I looked at her. She wasn't glowing or trying to be poetic. She just said it like you'd say you're finally not cold anymore. And I realized I felt the same. A week later, I got a call from a mutual friend. My ex had left town. New job. New city. Starting over. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't need her to. We'd already set everything in the space between what was and what had never truly been. I hung up the phone and stared out the window for a long time. Not thinking. Just, acknowledging. That chapter was done. Not torn out. Not burned. Just closed. May and I built the studio slowly. Piece by piece. Window by window. She painted the walls in shades of soft green and driftwood gray. I lined the shelves with books I'd kept boxed up for too long. We added a small record player. A cozy armchair. A desk made from reclaimed wood that still smelled like the trees it came from. It was never supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be ours. And it was. On the first chilly night of winter, May handed me a cup of tea and pointed to the corner of the room. There was a small box there. Wooden. Familiar. The lockbox. I think it's time, she said. She handed me the key. I opened it slowly. Inside were letters. Dozens. Some dated. Some not. She sat beside me while I read. Some were from before she met me, fragments of a woman learning who she was. Others were from the early days of us, scribbled notes about laughing in grocery aisles and the first time I told her I didn't feel broken anymore. And the most recent one? It was short. You are my quiet miracle. The thing I never saw coming, but always hoped for in the spaces I didn't speak about. We may not have met first. But I hope we meet last. I didn't say anything at first. Just held her hand. Let the silence say what it needed to. Then I whispered, me too. That night, I wrote my own letter. For her. No plans. No promises. Just a thank you. For loving me in the aftermath. For teaching me what it meant to build forward. Sometimes, I still think about the man I was the night my wife first said, I want something different. I think about the part of me that thought I could fix it by giving her what she asked for. And I forgive him. Because that broken man is the one who opened the door that led here. To something honest. To someone real. To better. May and I still walk the neighborhood. Still argue over music and steal each other's socks and leave half-finished puzzles on the kitchen table. Our life isn't flawless. But it's ours. And every day, we choose it again. That's the secret, I think. You don't find better. You build it. Together.